Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Making It in Manhattan. Today's episode is going to be a guide to vintage shopping, one of my absolute favorite things. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I love vintage and I love thrifting. So I'm going to be sharing with you all of my go-to spots and my tips and tricks to doing it right. So let's get started. So in college is actually when I first started thrifting. So as you guys might know, I went to a small liberal arts college in Reading, Pennsylvania, and in one of the very first weeks there, I'd made some new friends and we decided that we were going to go out shopping. I wasn't really familiar with the area, but a lot of my other classmates actually grew up in Pennsylvania. I was one of the few people from New York that actually went to Albright College. So they told me that they were going to take me to the mall. And growing up in New York, I love going to the mall. I love going to Macy's. My mom and my grandma used to take me to Macy's all the time. But when we got to the mall did not have a Macy's. It turned out that in Reading, Pennsylvania, they do not have any Macy's. So I was shook. And so from there, I decided that I wanted to find new and different places to go shopping. Again, in college, I didn't have a lot of money to spend. So thrifting was the way that I went. There was one Goodwill in town that we used to go to all the time. And one of my first thrifting experiences ever, I remember walking in and just being so excited looking at the price tags and realizing that I could actually afford to buy a lot of the clothing, because when you love fashion and you're growing up, you can't afford expensive designer things. And in college is when I really first began experimenting with my style. It was the first time in my entire life that I actually didn't have to wear a uniform. So I will never forget, my first thrifted item was a pair of Levi's and they still had the ticket on it. And I remember taking it to the dressing room and being so excited that they had the ticket on them still. So in my eyes, they were brand new, they were affordable, and I put them on and they fit like a glove. And I like to say from that moment, I was absolutely hooked and knew that I just wanted to continue thrifting and vintage shopping and searching. I think what I love about it so much is the hunt, and that you will never find the same thing as somebody else. It's always going to be unique and different. And sometimes you might not find anything. And that's the beauty of it. It's like a treasure hunt each and every time. So I started thrifting in college a little bit here and there, but it wasn't really until I graduated and started working in New York City that I really started hardcore vintage shopping and thrifting and finding my go-to spots and learning the ins and outs of it all. So I'm going to share with you guys my ultimate list. This is an episode where there is no gatekeeping. I am drawing back the curtain and I'm going to tell you guys my ultimate favorite go-to spots, both online and in New York City, that I go thrifting and vintage shopping, and also some of my favorite pieces that I found throughout the journey. But before I go into that, I also want to touch on that I love shopping at TJ Maxx. I've talked about this a lot, but my mom used to take me all the time to TJ Maxx growing up. And my point being, that is where I got my very first designer bag ever. I feel like we can all pinpoint back in our minds that first designer bag or that big first designer purchase. So for me, my first designer bag or purchase that my mom bought me was a Betsy Johnson bag from TJ Maxx. And it was black and it was embroidered on the front with this rainbow print and pattern, and it had a brown leather strap. And I just remember being so excited and my mom being so excited because, growing up, my mom didn't, we didn't spend a lot of money on really expensive designer items, but my mom and dad did really support my love of fashion. So when fashion met affordability, like at places like TJ Maxx and with vintage and thrift shopping, it was always such a special and beautiful moment because I was able to do what I love. My parents were supporting me and my passions and my ambitions. And that Betsy Johnson bag, it's so funny to think how that purchasing of that bag kind of had such an impact on the trajectory of my entire life, because now I've worked with Betsy Johnson and I've interviewed Betsy Johnson and she wrote an endorsement for my book, Making It in Manhattan. So it's just so funny how one bag, buying one bag can define the journey of your life, which I just think is so funny. And then the first designer bag that I ever bought for myself was a secondhand bag. And I say that I actually only had secondhand designer bags up until like a year and a half ago. But my first designer bag that I ever bought myself was from Rebag. It's this website online, and they also have stores in the city, but it's amazing. They have vintage bags and they have secondhand designer bags. But they do this loan program sometimes with influencers where they let you borrow bags. So I had actually borrowed this beautiful watercolor print Chanel bag, and it's from one of their resort collections, and it's all colorful and like almost a tie-dye watercolor print on it. It has a big plastic Chanel C's on the front in a light blue and a light pink, and it's just so beautiful. And it's different. It's me in a Chanel bag. It's so unique. You know, most people for their first Chanel bag, they buy a classic black one. But so I got to borrow that bag for like a week, and then when I had to return it, I was like, I really want to buy this bag. Like, I really want to own this bag because it was so unique and different that I almost felt like if I gave it back, I would never find it again. And that's kind of the feeling with vintage and thrifting. Like, if you see something you love, grab it, because if you let it go, chances are you might never find that item again. And that's something I've had to learn the hard way over the years. And that's why we're having this conversation now, so I can teach you guys not to make the mistakes I did. So thankfully, I reached out to the company and I asked them if I could buy it, and they let me buy it. And that was my first designer bag purchase. So it was a secondhand bag. So with that being said, you can get such great deals on secondhand and vintage designer bags. You don't have to only buy designer bags firsthand. I think personally, I prefer the hunt and the chase and finding something rather than just going on, you know, a website that is a brand new website, or going just into a store and buying something brand new that anyone could have. I like finding something that's like one of one or one of 70. So now we are going to go into my go-to and favorite places and some of the things that I've found along the way. So online, I'm going to start with one of my all-time favorites, which is eBay. I think for vintage shopping, eBay is a great place to start because there is so much there, and really the prices are all over the place. So if you take the time to search and hunt and filter down, you can really find some amazing pieces. Also, eBay does have, because you're probably listening to this and thinking, well, it can be risky shopping online on eBay. Like, what if things are authentic? But eBay does have an authenticity guarantee service for designer bags and for watches, and I believe designer jewelry, where if it has a blue check mark next to it on the website, it means that once you buy it, the item will be sent to a team of authenticators. So you don't have to worry, and that's something for me that I love because you get worried shopping online. I've even done it myself where, is this real? Is this not? With that service, it doesn't work for clothing, but for bags and jewelry and watches, it does. So, and a lot of what I buy on eBay is designer bags. So I think it's a really great service to take advantage of. One of my absolute favorite things that I've ever bought on eBay is actually a vintage Dior saddlebag. As we know, the Dior saddlebag made a comeback a few years ago, and now even the vintage ones are so expensive because Dior started remaking the saddlebags, and they're so beautiful, but they definitely are expensive. So I can remember when Dior first showed the saddlebags again in one of their collections, Vogue wrote an article about it and was like, is this going to be the comeback of the Dior saddlebag? And before I read the headline, and I'm not even kidding, before I even finished reading the article, I ran to eBay. And I was searching Dior saddlebags, vintage Dior saddlebags, because this was before they started remaking any of them. So only the vintage ones existed. And I got one, I'm not even kidding, for like a couple $100s. And that same bag, I've seen it online and in vintage stores now for over $1,000. So like, if you can hit something when the time is right and before it takes off and before everyone starts buying it, you really can find a great deal. And I think this episode, you know, it can go hand in hand with what I was saying in the other episode about finding your personal sense of style. You know, money can't buy style. Like, it only buys fashion. So you don't need to have a lot of money to have amazing style. You can find amazing items online and in vintage stores and thrift stores at super, super affordable prices when you take the time to look. Another favorite of mine is the Real Real. I've gotten so many bags from the Real Real. I've gotten Fendi baguettes, little Chanel bags. Oh, one of my favorites is, if you've seen on my Instagram, this white Chanel bag that has this like red and yellow and green cross stitching along the front. That is one of my favorite bags that I found on the Real Real, but the Real Real is an amazing site as well. They have so much. But it can sometimes be a little bit overpriced. So you got to really look and you got to do some digging. The Real Real also does have a store in New York City, which I do love, because sometimes you'll see a bag online, and this has happened to me. And in the picture, it looks like it's one size, and then you get it, and it's much smaller than it was. That's happened to me before. I remember I bought this Fendi baguette that I do love, but I was looking in the photos, and I was like, thinking it was going to be one size, and then it came and it was mini, and I was like, oh, wasn't expecting that. That happened to me there. And then once there's this other website called Vestiaire Collective, and I've bought stuff from there as well, and they're a great secondhand and vintage website. But I bought this vintage Gucci bag from there. And this honestly wasn't even my fault, because there was no images of anyone holding the bag. I will say there were measurements, but I didn't really look at them. I just looked at the photos. And I just assumed it was like a mini bag, but not like mini. And when the bag came, I'm not even kidding, it's like a coin purse. So I'm saving it for one day when my niece gets older. I'm going to give it to her, because my niece is 1 year old right now. But when she's maybe like 4 or 5, she'll have her first Gucci bag, because it was like a kid's bag. I'm not even kidding. Or like a change purse. It's so cute, but I was definitely let down. So with that being said, if you find something online you love on the Real Real, you can check if they have it in the store. So then you can go and see it in person, make sure the quality is good, make sure the size is a real size that you want, and then you can go from there. Okay, other places I love. Poshmark is another amazing resale site. You obviously have to do some digging, because individual people, kind of like eBay, list their items on Poshmark. So you want to make sure things are authentic, things are of the quality that you want. But I got this amazing pair of sparkly Dolce & Gabbana boots on Poshmark. I love these boots. They almost look like tights. So the foot is hard, but then the part that you pull up, that's the boot, it's stretchy. So it's like tight boots or like a sock boot, but it's all silver sequins, and they are amazing. Then Rebag, as I said, watercolor Chanel bag, got it from Rebag. And I also got this amazing red Chanel bag. I feel like I'm just like talking about all of my bags right now, but I've hunted over the years. This is like not a one-time thing. This has been a journey, and I've been searching and finding, and I got this. I wanted a red Chanel bag with gold hardware for the longest time. And then I saw this one on Rebag, and it was actually 3 different shades of red. So the bag has like bright red, then it has dark red, and then it has a lighter red with gold hardware. And I just thought that was the perfect red Chanel bag for me, because as you guys know, I love mixing colors, and I'm a very colorful person. So a plain red Chanel bag almost felt too simple for me. So I got that on Rebag. Then Vestiaire Collective, another great website. As I said, I did get that mini Chanel coin, or not Chanel, Gucci coin purse accidentally that I thought was a full bag. But other things I have gotten from there. If you've seen on my Instagram, I have a few pieces that are vintage Prada from this flower collection they did. It's like very pop arty, and the flowers are really fun and big. But my first piece that I ever found from that collection was actually from eBay. And it's a red crossbody bag with a big white flower on it. And I love that bag. But since I found that bag, I have never found another piece from that collection. So I've searched and searched, and finally I found 2 pieces also from that collection on Vestiaire Collective. And one is this bigger yellow bag that has 2 of the white flowers on it. It has a top handle, and it's so fun. It's bright yellow, so it's so me. And then I found a pair of shoes that they're kind of like, I'll compare them to like a Teva. They have like the straps around the ankle and the strap around the front, but the bottom has all the flowers on it. And there's some flowers on the front, and they are so fun. I honestly haven't even worn them yet because I bought them during the winter here in New York. So I've been saving them for spring and summer. So cannot wait for it to get warm enough so I can wear those. But so I've found some great pieces on Vestiaire Collective, and I feel like the prices on Vestiaire Collective a lot of the time are pretty fair. So I really recommend them. And then the last website I'm going to recommend, hope you guys are taking notes. I feel like I'm spewing a lot of information and names at you, but if you miss anything, you can always send me a DM. The last website is called Fashion File, and they sell a lot of designer handbags secondhand as well for great prices, and they now have a showroom in New York City. So again, this is my list that I would say if you're not located in New York City and you are trying to find vintage designer pieces, look on these websites because they have so many amazing items. But if you're looking to take a trip to New York City, here's the fun part. I'm going to share with you guys my list of go-to New York City spots that I love shopping at for vintage and secondhand designer items. Okay, so the first spot that I'm going to talk about that I love is called Treasures of New York City. And they are a designer, they call it a clubhouse located in Soho. So with Treasures of New York City, the only thing is you have to make an appointment to go. You can't just walk in, but they drop their appointment slots the beginning of every single month, I believe. And usually you can get an appointment. It's not too hard, but it is getting more popular, so you need to be on it. But occasionally they do have appointments cancel and you can go and things like that. But they also do have a website. So if you're not in New York City, you can shop online. But I just love going in person and seeing everything. The point of it being a clubhouse and by appointment only, I kind of love that. The reason being, no one else will be there when your appointment is, so you can really take your time, look around. I think sometimes when you're in vintage stores, one of the things that can be a little bit intimidating is if you see something you love and you don't grab it right away, someone could be right behind your shoulder and grabbing the item, before you have a chance to get it, or someone could be looking at the same exact thing you're looking at and you're feeling pressured and anxious. I went to a vintage show a couple weeks ago that had like hundreds and hundreds of people there, and I'm not even kidding. I thought I was going to have a panic attack because there were so many people there and people were pushing and shoving to get to items. And I don't like shopping like that. I feel like I have to be inspired and I want to see everything and just enjoy the process. So I kind of really love the fact that you have to make an appointment to go here. And with that being said, it looks more like a showroom than a store. Like everything is set up on display. It looks like you're just walking into like Hannah Montana's closet. It's so fun. The pieces are very Y2K. I've gotten a couple of bags. I took myself there for my birthday last year and treated myself to a few birthday gifts. I got this little Louis Vuitton bag that has a mushroom on the front. I got this very limited edition Dior saddle bag. And then I've gotten, if you've seen, I have these vintage Dior tanks that I love. Got them both from there. So they are amazing. Definitely check out their Instagram though too, because they're always posting new pieces. And I'm not even kidding. I feel like anytime they post something new, it sells out. They'll like post a little Instagram story and be like, today's deal. And by the time I see it and click on it, I'm like, this is so cute. Gone. So if you love it, buy it. The next place, this is one of my absolute favorites as well. So Treasures, and then the next one I just love. It's called Arcade, and it's in Brooklyn in Industry City. And I love this store because it's so well curated. I feel like sometimes you walk into vintage stores and it's very overwhelming and there's just too much and you don't know where to start and you almost feel leaving with a sense of confusion. Like, should I have bought something? Was there anything I really liked? Or did I even really like this piece? I think that sometimes can be the process of vintage shopping, but this store is not too big, so it's not too overwhelming. It's very well curated. The sections are also often curated by color, so I really love that because I'll walk in and there's like the rack of all black clothing, and I'm like, like not for me, so I'll pass, but there's a rack of all pink clothing. I'll go look through that. The red clothing, or like maybe there's a rack of all neutrals with just all white clothing, maybe pass that too. But so you're not really like wasting your time looking through, like sometimes in vintage stores, I feel like you need to like seed through everything, which you still do, but at least it's color coordinated. So it makes it so much easier. At Arcade also, which I love, is they do have designer items, but then they also just have no-name, beautiful vintage pieces. So I've gotten some of my favorite items from there that are vintage, but are just totally random brands that I've never heard of. I have this one sweater from them that I wear all the time. No designer name. It's hot pink, and it has big graphics of stars and moons on it, and it's all colorful. My Christmas Eve dress this year, which was green with these big poofy sleeves with gold on it, was from there. Oh my goodness, I've gotten so much from Arcade. My vintage New York City crew neck, the sequin dress that I wore in Paris with the pink Louboutin boots, that was from Arcade. Ooh, what else? I got these vintage printed plaid Wrangler pants. So many things. Like, I feel like a lot of my wardrobe is from Arcade, just because it is so well done and so well curated. And the people are really nice too. So it makes shopping there really fun and no pressure. Like, you walk in, if you see something you love, great, but no pressure to buy anything. But I usually always find something whenever I'm there. I will say I usually always find something. So definitely worth taking the trip out to Brooklyn to visit Arcade. My next store is also in Soho. It's called No Standing NYC, a beautiful curated vintage store. I also love it's all white, like very white, and then the clothing is just like along two sides of the store. It's kind of like a skinnier store, and then it opens up wide in the back. I just love the aesthetic of that. I think it's very beautifully laid out. I've found vintage Pucci stuff there, which I love vintage Pucci. It's currently, again, I'm giving away all my secrets right now. Vintage Pucci is what I've been searching for at the moment. I feel like I've been collecting it over the past year, and any place that I can find vintage Pucci is a win for me. But I think the store is very beautiful, well curated, not too big, and you don't need an appointment for this one in Soho. So if you're visiting New York and spending your day in Soho, you don't have to worry like, I don't have an appointment to go. You can just go, browse in and out, and it's in a very good spot. So there's tons of coffee shops and fun things to do around there. My next I'm going to recommend is called Funny Pretty Nice, and there's 2 locations. Again, this store is very Y2K, and it has a mix of some designer vintage, but then also just no-name, fun vintage pieces. And I think that's always a good store, because maybe you don't want to spend a ton of money on designer vintage, but you just want to find cool vintage pieces and different vintage pieces. So Funny Pretty Nice is a really great curated store. Again, I feel like all the ones I'm recommending are small, because that's how I like to shop. I like to shop in small curated stores that aren't too overwhelming. And also, don't get me wrong, I love going to a thrift store and spending hours looking through racks, but sometimes it's nice to just like go in, do a quick pan around the store. Hey, did I find anything I loved? No, head out. Or, oh my gosh, I found like 3 things, let me try them on. So the next store that I'm going to recommend is on Spring Street, and I might butcher the name, but it's called Aberisk, and I don't know what the name means exactly, but I discovered it probably about this time last year when I was having a day where I just wanted to do a little vintage shopping. So I Googled vintage stores in the area, found this store, super small, well curated. I found some really cool tops there. I have this one vintage Dolce & Gabbana tee that has Paris written in this big graphic on the front, and I wear it all the time in a lot of my TikToks. I also recently got, which I'm saving it for the summer, I cannot wait to wear this, I got this vintage Versace white tank top. But then, when people go to the Jersey Shore and they get airbrushed tanks? Well, it looks like that, but the airbrushing is the word Versace. And it's so cool and so different, and highly recommend that store. Okay, some of my other faves, just to go through them. Designer Revival, that is uptown though, on like 80th or so. Another amazing store, highly recommend. designer vintage. Another designer vintage is What Goes Around Comes Around. I actually just went to their store this week to borrow a look for this really fun event they're doing, but I got to borrow a vintage Chanel suit. I have to return it, sadly, but they have a great selection. Vintage Chanel suits, can never go wrong with that. Dana Foley is a store in the East Village, and they're cool because they have a lot of vintage pieces, but then there's also repurposed pieces that they put feathers on, and I love that. I bought a top from them that they repurposed that was vintage, but then they put all feathers on the bottom of the top. So I think that's kind of fun to take vintage pieces but then upcycle them, and I would recommend Dana Foley if you're looking for vintage and upcycled pieces. Next, you can never go wrong with Goodwill. I also wanted to call out, I feel like the Goodwills in New York City always have hidden gems. So highly recommend going to Goodwill if you live in New York City or visiting New York City. A Goodwill, you'd need to take a little bit more time, go through, look through everything. Those are the stores, they're not curated. So you need to take the time to hunt and to search and to find those hidden treasures. But I definitely recommend Goodwill. I've found amazing pieces there, both in the city, in New Jersey, if I'm traveling. If I'm somewhere, I always kind of like hitting up a Goodwill, especially if I'm in a different spot, because you never know what you might find. Then I also wanted to call out that in New York City, they do vintage shows. So it was just recently the Manhattan Vintage Show. I know there's a Brooklyn Vintage Show. And then I recently went to a Current Affair, which is a huge vintage show that took place in Industry City in Brooklyn. So you can look these up online, see when they're coming, and make it a point to visit New York City during the vintage shows, because what the vintage shows are essentially is it's all different vendors who come into this one space and set up little booths. So it kind of gives you more of an opportunity to find something. Like the likelihood of finding something at a vintage show is super high because there's so many different vendors and they all have different aesthetics and tastes. Like one booth could be very Y2K, one booth could be all like high-end designer vintage, another booth could be no-name designer vintage, another booth could be just jewelry, another booth could be just bags, another booth, in my dreams, could be all vintage Poochie. Like, you never know what you're gonna find, and there's just a lot more options at a vintage show. So if you can come to New York City and visit New York City during a vintage show, or if you live here and you've never been to a vintage show, I highly recommend checking out the vintage shows. As I said, I just went to a Current Affair. I got so much stuff. I did a haul on TikTok and Instagram, but okay, let's go through real quick. What did I get? I got a vintage Poochie set, which is amazing. It's like this stunning velvet skirt and matching vest. I got a real vintage feather boa. So excited about that. I got a neon Fendi baguette. I got this vintage rainbow skirt. I got a vintage pair of earrings. I feel like I'm probably forgetting something, but that's just like a quick rundown. But I will say I spent like 4 hours there because I had to go through. There was so much. It wasn't it's not well curated because there's so many vendors. Like each booth is well curated, but there's so many booths to look through. So it's a day-long affair, or maybe even 2 days long if you want to make a weekend out of it. And then I just wanted to also throw in, for me personally, I know this isn't vintage or thrift, but I do still shop at TJ Maxx for sure, and you can still find amazing designer items there at the runway at TJ Maxx. I literally have found Missoni there, and they have Manolo and Stuart Weitzman and Louboutin. Sometimes, you just need to go through and look and take the time. And obviously, even with vintage shopping, it's always hit or miss. No matter if it's Goodwill or TJ Maxx or Arcade in Brooklyn, it could always be hit or miss. So just because you have an off day, don't get down on yourself. And then my last thing in New York City that I wanted to just quickly touch on, because why not, is sample sales. Sample sales are amazing and a great place to find well-priced items. There's this place, it's called 260 Sample Sale. If you've never heard of it, they have, I think, a space, I know in Soho, and then another one, maybe around 20-something or 30th. You can look it up online. But brands, so they will rent out the space to different brands. So I believe Alice and Olivia has a sample sale coming up soon. Love Shack Fancy had a sample sale there. Rent the Runway did one, I believe, and that's super cool because it's all different brands, which is really amazing to get to have a selection. So sample sales are another amazing thing. I feel like 260 sample sale right now in my mind is like the one to go to in the city. But when I was interning in New York City back in 2012, 2013, oh my goodness, every single lunch break, I feel like there was a different sample sale, and I would go all the time. Not that I had a lot of money, but I would just go to look around to see and be part of the excitement. I remember going to a Calvin Klein sample sale during that time, and I was so excited. I think I got like one pair of shoes, and looking back, they were like a pair of gray pumps, like not very me now, but I was just so excited at the time. And then I actually went to, in 2012, Betsy Johnson did like a huge showroom, like blowout sale. And I got this amazing gold dress with purple tulle peeking out from the bottom. And it's one of my favorite pieces, and I honestly wish I had more money at the time to buy more things because the prices were amazing, but I still treasure that dress to this day. So sample sales are amazing because though they're samples, sometimes they're still the exact same quality of the real items. So you're getting good quality pieces at a fraction of the cost. So why do I love vintage and thrifting? I mean, my first reason is you just find unique pieces. Personally, and I feel like most of us feel this way, you don't want to just look like everybody else. You don't want to dress like everybody else. I really pride myself on trying to be an individual and to be unique. And when you go vintage shopping and thrift shopping, you can find pieces that you might never see again. I still kick myself for certain things I've seen that I didn't buy and I've never found again. So just in the sense of being unique and trying to build a unique wardrobe, I think vintage shopping and thrifting is amazing for that. Then developing a sense of style instead of just following trends and buying from fast fashion brands. I think when you vintage shop, it forces you to not just follow the trends and to wear what everyone else is wearing and to wear the new it item. If anything, you're pushing yourself to wear something that maybe nobody is wearing. You could honestly be setting trends. You could be finding something that becomes cool again before everybody else, like the Dior saddlebag before it made a comeback. Or, right now I feel like flowers and like flower brooches and pins are trending so much, but I feel like in the vintage world, they were probably trending like 2 years ago, and now they're making their way into mainstream fashion with, flower chokers and everything. So when you're vintage shopping, it's forcing you almost to be more unique and to really pick up on what you like, because you're walking into a store that has so many different items and so many different styles of items. It's not like you're walking into a store that just has what's trendy and what's cool. So you're then almost forced to go into the store and think to yourself, well, what do I really like? What do I gravitate towards? What will I wear? And I don't care about trends, and I don't care about what anyone else is wearing. And essentially because of that, it'll force you to almost develop your own personal sense of style. It'll force you to, dress outside the lines, maybe dress more colorfully and fun, because you're not just going to be wearing the new hot item that's at Zara or whatever it might be. And usually I would say too, depending, it's usually better prices and can often be better quality as opposed to just shopping at fast fashion stores. I think that's the thing. A lot of people want to build an amazing wardrobe without spending a lot of money. So thrifting and vintage shopping is really the way to go. As I said, most of my designer bags up until like a year and a half ago were all vintage or secondhand designer bags. And the reason being was I was just getting such amazing prices on all of them. So I didn't feel a need to buy any bags firsthand. The first bag that I bought brand new was this black sequin Prada bag that I have that just says Prada in big white sequins on the front. And I love the bag. I do love it. And it actually wasn't until after I bought it and came home and was in my closet looking around and like putting it in a shelf in my closet that I realized, oh my goodness, this is my first not secondhand designer bag, which was cool, but there was also no reason in particular why I needed to shop for brand new bags. There's just as many amazing options out there that are secondhand. And when you really dig and you really search, and also too, you can get bags for really great prices if they're maybe not in the best quality, but then you could take them to a leather spa or to a cobbler and have them repaired and have them fixed up. I have this vintage Louis Vuitton wallet that I bought on eBay when I was in college, and I had spent, it was so cheap. It was so cheap because it was all beat up. The piping on the side was all ripped up. The pockets on the inside were all ripped, but it was all that I could afford at the time. So I bought it and I used it like that. I just used it like that for years because I was just so proud and excited that I bought a secondhand Louis Vuitton wallet. And finally, I will say this year, I took it to a cobbler and had it fixed and repaired. And now I'm still using it. It's currently in my purse and I love it so much and I'm so proud of it. But with that being said, you can find designer items. If they're not in the best shape, you can get a good deal for it, and then you could always have them repaired, and then you just raise the value. So if you ever want to sell it again, you can make money off of it. Okay, so now I'm going to share my tips and tricks to vintage and thrifting, because you don't want to just go in with no game plan because it can feel very overwhelming. So my first tip, of course, is to go in with a purpose. So what are you looking for exactly? Have a clear idea. So for me, for a while, I was looking for sparkly vintage tops, sequined vintage tops. That's what I wanted. And so I would go into any store and keep that in mind. So maybe you're looking for vintage Levi's. Maybe you're looking for flowy spring dresses. Maybe you're looking for little vintage knitted tops. Whatever it might be, go in with a clear purpose and thought in mind because it'll just make shopping so much easier. Then take your time and go through the racks. Really, you got to take the time because otherwise you're going to miss out on items. Also, you don't want to go in with a time limit and be rushed because just with vintage stores, there can be so much, or even if it's a curated store, you want to take the time, really look at each item. What's the quality look like? How does it feel? Do you like how it fits? Make sure you have the time to go through the racks, and then bring a friend. I always bring Dave. Dave is my favorite shopping buddy because though he's not the biggest fashionista, he really understands vintage and appreciates vintage. That was the word I was looking for. He really appreciates vintage and is able to see certain items and be like, I could see you wearing this. I know you'll love this. He helps me scour through the racks, and he also will hold all of my bags, which is very, very nice. So bring a friend with you because it makes it more fun to turn to your friend and be like, oh, look what I found. It's more exciting. Or if you go in with a friend, you can also tell them what you're looking for. Hopefully you guys are looking for different things, so there's no overlap. But maybe you're looking for one thing and they're looking for another thing. You can tell each other what you're looking for, and then you can keep an eye out for each other. Ooh, my next tip is to look online to compare prices. So if you're in a store and you see something vintage that's amazing, whether you love it or you're so about it, you're not sure, quickly do a Google search online and just compare the prices. Because one, you could be getting an amazing price and then you're like, oh my goodness, I need to buy this. I can't find it anywhere else for this price. Or you might be being taken advantage of. So I always, if I find a bag or a specific shoe, or see if you also can find it online, period. If you can find it online and maybe can negotiate with a seller online, because sometimes in stores, you unfortunately can't really negotiate. I feel like prices that are set in stores are a little bit more set in stone, unless there's a hole or something that you find. Maybe you can negotiate a little bit, but always compare online. I'm always quickly Googling on my phone just to compare, hey, is this a fair price or are they taking advantage of me? My next tip, I wrote this down. Like it, ? In all caps, grab it. My biggest tip here is if you see something you loved, do not just leave it on the rack, because if someone behind you sees it and they love it, they will take it, and then it'll just be a catastrophe. You'll be heartbroken. So if you see something you like, grab it. Especially don't tell yourself, oh, I'll come back in 5 minutes and I'll get it. Or, let me think about it. Like, you can think about it, but while you're holding it. Always, always, always grab it. If you like it, grab it. You don't want to have any regrets when it comes time to leave the store. My next thing is always ask yourself, will I actually wear this? That's one of the things that I always ask myself, whether I'm vintage shopping or just regular shopping, is do I see myself actually wearing this? And then how do I see myself styling this? Try to picture at least 2 to 3 outfits you could see yourself styling this item with to make sure that it's actually worth the investment and actually something you could see yourself wearing, because even if you love it but you don't really see yourself personally wearing it, leave it for somebody else who you think will really, really love it and wear it all the time. My next tip is always look at the quality. Are there holes in the item? And if there are they worth fixing? Are they worth repairing? Can you repair it? I've found things before that maybe had a little snag, but it felt worth it to me to just take it to a tailor afterwards and have it fixed, or try to negotiate the price down if there's a hole. So always, always, always look, because you don't want to wait till you get home and be like, there's a snag in the back. I should have said something, or I should have tried to negotiate. Look in the moment, take the time. Takes only a few minutes. And then with that being said, in terms of repairing holes, always clean before wearing. Vintage, thrifting, no matter what it is, if you need to dry clean it, a lot of my items I feel like are more delicate with sequins and things like that. I get a lot of my clothing dry cleaned, but machine wash cold or hand wash, always clean before wearing. It also just makes it feel brand new, and it makes it feel like yours. I feel like the instant you get it cleaned or get it dry cleaned and put it home, put it in your closet, it instantly becomes part of you. So my making it in Manhattan tip for the episode for vintage and thrifting is be mindful, take your time, take risks, and set trends. So with that being said, vintage shopping, you're not just going to get what's out there, the trendy items. You're going to be offered different items, old items, things that haven't been in trend for a while, but maybe they're making a comeback. Take the risks. Don't be afraid to try out something new. As I said, if you love it, buy it, wear it. I bet you could set a trend. You could bring something back. You could resurface something that your mom loved wearing. My mom always makes me laugh because I'll come in to her house wearing something and she'll say to me, I used to have something just like that, or I used to wear something just like it. The other week, my mom was cleaning out her closet and she called me and she's like, these are no longer old dresses, they're vintage dresses. And she loves being able to say that now. And of course, I feel like back in the day in her time, there was a bad connotation against something being old or no longer trendy, but now that it's vintage, it's, it gives it a second life. One of my favorite things when I'm leaving a vintage store with an item is to think to myself, the past lives this piece has had, and now all of the new lives it's going to have with me and all of the adventures we're going to go on. And maybe that's why I get a sentimental attachment to my clothing and it's hard for me to get rid of anything. But to think you're taking an item that had a beautiful life and you're going to give it another life, and it's going to get to be out on the town again for a fun night out or be with you when you get engaged, whatever it might be. So take time, take risks, and don't be afraid to set those trends. So our Making It in Manhattan question of the week. How do you find really cool vintage pieces that can last in your wardrobe but also fit in the trends? You always find such good pieces. Thank you. I love vintage shopping, as you guys know. I could talk on and on about this. I think when it comes, I'm going to answer this in 2 parts, because when it comes to finding really cool vintage pieces, I shop for a lot of statement pieces. I'm always looking for sequins. I'm always looking for feathers, prints, things that feel unique and different and also feel like I haven't seen them before. That's one of my biggest things. So I think that's what'll help you find unique and different pieces. Look for cool textures. Look for cool prints. Also think to yourself, have I seen this before? If I've never seen this before, bingo, we have a winner. That's my favorite thing. And then I also think in terms of finding really cool vintage pieces, all of the places that I just listed really do a great job curating their stores. They do, half of the hard work for you. They find cool designer items that they then curate in their store. So check out these places I listed. Let me know what you find. I really think you guys will find some amazing pieces. And then in terms of like the part about can it last in your wardrobe, look at the quality. Really check the quality of everything. Make sure it feels like it's going to last. As I said, are there runs, are there holes and things like that? But then also cleaning your clothing, getting it dry cleaned, keeping it in a good environment. I feel like they say clothing's supposed to be stored in like a little bit of a colder room. Vintage pieces can be very delicate. So making sure your items are stored in a nice way. And then the last part of the question that said, but also fit with the trends. So, it's funny because when I shop, I don't think about trends at all. I honestly sometimes try not to think about trends because I don't want them to impact the way I shop too much. I don't want it to feel like, well, do I really like this, or do I like this because I'm being told I like this? I think more often than not, when you shop, just depending on what you like and you don't follow trends, your wardrobe ends up following the trends or setting the trends, and then the trends kind of follow you. I think the beauty right now, though, is post-COVID or, in the world we're living in since COVID, there's no rules when it comes to fashion. Like, we spend a time inside not getting dressed up at all. So I think right now everyone just wants to dress up and have fun with fashion and wear their most colorful, fun pieces. So I think there's a lot of trends and a lot of micro trends, and it's not so much about, like low-rise jeans are trendy right now. If you're not wearing that, you're not cool. I feel like that was when I was in high school. That's why I'm referencing that. But I feel like that doesn't happen so much anymore. I feel like there's a lot of trends happening at once, and so you can kind of be part of what's trendy while also just following what you love and wearing what you love and not thinking about the trends, because if anything, I feel like there's so many trends happening at once that like you'll just, without even trying, kind of fit into a box, even without trying to fit into a box. But at the end of the day, don't worry about trends. Don't try to follow the trends, especially when you're vintage and thrifting. Don't go into a store thinking about trends, because it'll put like a haze in front of your view and stop you from maybe grabbing some really, really amazing pieces that you could end up having in your wardrobe for years and years to come. So that is a wrap on another episode of Making It in Manhattan. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I cannot wait to hear all about your thrifty and vintage finds. Make sure to send me a comment, a DM, leave me a review, and I will see you guys next week.